previous week we have discussed about the coordination. I hope we have discussed, we started with, the first lecture was about receptors or the components of the coordination, the second lecture was about brain, and third lecture was about the spinal cord. And then we also discussed about some of their functions also, that how spinal cord is working. So everything we have discussed in detail. And now we are going to discuss that how our nervous system is working. That is also very important to understand, that how our nervous system is working. The working of nervous system is divided into three different parts. There are some of our activities which are called sensation, some of our activities are called voluntary actions, and some are called involuntary actions. So one by one we will be discussing. First of all, the sensation. Sensation, it is an input about physical world obtained by our sensory receptors. You know, the sensory receptors are, we have the 5 different receptors. So with the help of sensory receptors, these receptors are eye, ear, all our 5 senses. So whatever the information we are getting from the world, so that is known as, with the help of sensory organs, that one is known as the sensation. Then comes the voluntary action. It is the deliberate action. For example, when we decide to raise our hand. For example, if you are sitting in the class and you receive and there is some information, teacher is asking a question, and then if you know the answer, then you raise your hand. So that one is known as the voluntary action. There are many other voluntary actions also. This is one of the example of the voluntary action. And then comes the involuntary actions, are further divided into 2 parts. One is known as autonomic actions and another one is called reflex action. Involuntary action, the actions without conscious control, in which our brain is not involved, they are known as the involuntary action. So that one is known as autonomic actions. Autonomic means which are not in our control. For example, peristalsis. You know, the peristalsis is not in our control. You cannot control your heartbeat. And there is another type of the involuntary actions which are known as reflex action. For example, if you are working in your kitchen and you are not like attentive, you are doing something else, maybe you are listening some sort of music or something, and by the way you keep on moving on the backward side, and by the way you touch your hand to something which is hot, maybe a pot or something, and right away you move your hand. So, and that after moving your hand, then you look at your hand and you feel, okay, it has been burned from somewhere. So this is known as reflex action, in which very limited number of neurons are involved. So we will be discussing all these 3 different types of the 3 different types of the functioning of the brain, one by one with the help of a diagram, in which all these actions are explained. Basically, our purpose to study today is the reflex action. So we will discuss this in detail, but all these parts we will also be discussing with the help of a book, that how our brain and the nervous system is working in this one. Okay class, now we will discuss all these different parts of the functioning of the nervous system with the help of this diagram. And this diagram explains about all, you can see, I'll send you this picture also, and you're not going to draw this picture, only just to understand. You can see there are some green arrows are there and some blue arrows are also there. So when you touch a piece of ice, we feel the coldness. This is because the temperature receptors in the skin stimulated, impulses are produced, impulses are transmitted to forebrain, the brain interprets the impulses, and we have a sensation of coldness. The pathway of impulses shown blue in figure. So here is the skin, you can see. So the coldness will be traveling through this. Then this is a sensory neuron, you can see. And then it will be traveling towards the brain. And inside the brain, this is inside the brain, you know that a sensation of coldness will be produced with the help of this one. So this is how the sensation, the first step of the functioning of the nervous system, that is the sensation is working. So here from here it is going like this, and then it is moving towards this side, and inside the brain the sensation is produced. As the voluntary actions are the deliberate action, impulses are produced in the forebrain. Impulses are transmitted by the relay neuron from the forebrain down to white matter of the spinal cord and then into the grey matter. In the grey matter, impulses are transmitted to the motor neuron, which transmit the impulses to effector muscles in our arm, and muscles contract and our hand is raised. So in case of that one, this is now represented with the help of green arrow, you can see. So you think that you know the answer very well. So when you know the answer very well, so you think you are the right, you're thinking by your brain, and then the message is traveling from here, then this will be traveling through your nervous system, through the spinal cord. Here it is coming with the relay neuron, and then relay neuron will shift this is the relay neuron, you can clearly identify the relay neuron. It will shift the message to motor neuron, and then from the motor neuron the message will be coming to you, the muscles of your hand, and then your hand will be raised with the help of this. And the last part of that is the involuntary actions are also there, and involuntary actions are autonomic. We have discussed about the peristalsis as well as about the reflex action. Now in detail we will be talking about the reflex action. Okay class, now we will be discussing about the reflex action. And reflex action is one of the very important concept that is we have to discuss. And reflex action is basically, as I discussed in a short form, I discussed with you, reflex action is an immediate response to a specific stimulus without conscious control. Like in which there is no conscious control, like in which your brain is not involved, that one is known as a reflex action. For example, if we touch the hot object and we just withdraw our hand, and there is an example of knee jerk. We can also show how the knee jerk can be carried out. Reflex action is an involuntary action. It is the simplest form of response in human and occurs without any conscious effort. So no involvement of brain in this one, and so that's why it's the simplest form of response, very simplest form of the response. It is normally not possible to prevent them consciously. Mean you cannot, for example, in case of knee jerk, you cannot control your knee jerk. Sometimes we go to doctors and they ask us to sit on the table and by hanging our legs, and then when we are sitting over there, so they are just hit with the help of a rubber hammer. They hit on our knee joint. And below the knee joint, so they hit over there, and we just move our leg, just swing and then comes back. They again hit it, swing. Whatever you try to control this one, you cannot control. So that's why it's written, it is normally not possible to prevent them. You cannot prevent them consciously. And the reflex actions are of two different types. It is the spinal cord and brain are the reflex centers. So there are two reflex centers. One is the brain and other is the spinal cord. So those which are so reflex action, on the basis of this we can say the reflex action may be classified as cranial reflexes and spinal reflexes. Cranial reflexes are controlled by brain and occurs in head region. For example, pupil reflexes. You have studied this chapter of eye also. Pupil reflex, if we like put the light on our eye suddenly, so the pupil will contract and they will be the size of pupil will be shorter. And if we like move the light away from that, then the size of pupil will be changing later on. So that one is known as pupil reflex. Blinking. But blinking is also a kind of we can say it is known as the cranial reflex controlled by our brain, but not the conscious part of our brain is not controlling this one. It's not the conscious part of our brain is controlling this. So that one is known as the blinking pupil reflex, and salivation also, production of saliva from your mouth. So that one is also the cranial reflex. As the spinal reflexes are concerned, spinal reflexes are controlled by the spinal cord. I explained knee jerk and sudden withdrawal of the hand on touching the hard object. So these one are known as the, these are called spinal reflexes. So we can divide the, so as there are two reflex centers, one is the brain and other is the spinal cord. So similarly, there are two types of the reflex actions are there. One is known as the cranial reflexes and the spinal reflexes. Now comes how our brain is controlling these reflex actions. So that one is very important. And there is another very important term that is known as reflex arc. You know, whatever the kind of the reflex action is there, whatever the kind of reflex action is there will be only 3 neurons will be involved in this one. A sensory neuron, a motor neuron, and a relay neuron. So a pathway, so there is another very important term is there that is called reflex arc. It is the neural pathway through which reflex action is carried out. Neural pathway means nervous pathway through which the reflex action is controlled, and reflex arc is also known as the functional unit of reflex action. Like how the reflex action is working. The working of the reflex action is controlled by the reflex arc, we can say, like all the reflex actions are taking place with the help of reflex arc. All the reflex actions are taking place with the reflex arc. Okay class, this is an hot object, and if suddenly our hand touches this hot object, so you can see in this one, this is a sensory neuron which is taking the message, see, and then it is going, this is, you know, this is known as the spinal nerve. It is taking the message. This is the sensory neuron. It will take the message to spinal cord, and then from the spinal cord, this is a relay neuron. You can clearly identify this is a relay neuron, and from the relay neuron, this is a motor neuron, and this motor neuron will bring the message to these muscles. These muscles will be contracting, and as they contract, our hand from this, it will go to this side. So it means this will be a sudden jerk will be there, but as we touch the hot object and we move our hand, in this time duration, there will be we will not do it consciously. There will be no conscious control on this one. Later on, we will look at our hand, maybe it's burnt or something, we are going to put it under the water, or maybe we are going to put some sort of ointment. So all these actions are involving our brain. But this action, which is the touching of this one and withdrawal of hand from this position to this, there is no conscious control in this one. Okay class, now this is another explanation. The last part of that was a reflex arc. See, it is making an arc. It's just like an arc. Why? Because an arc is, you know, in mathematics I've studied the circle, we draw the arc. So just like that, this is an arc. And this is again, this is our skin. Here is the sensory neuron, a very clear relay neuron is there, and this is the this one is the motor neuron, and these are our muscles. So this one is called the reflex. It is called the functional unit of the reflex action. Functional unit of reflex action is called reflex arc. I hope you remember when we studied about the structure of neuron, we made this diagram in like if it is in the horizontal form, so we made at that time that diagram was in the vertical form, but now it is in the horizontal form. Very clearly relay neuron is there, sensory neuron, so the 3 neurons are working in a coordination with each other, so that is called a reflex arc. This is a reflex arc. Reflex arc is the functional unit of the reflex action.